So with this week's episode of Demon Slayer, we get a shift in style than what was seen with episode 1, and I did know that there was going to be some more lighthearted moments and some more shonen design sequences, so I wasn't surprised that this episode had a lot more lightheartedness to it than in comparison to the first episode. But for those who may not have known, I could understand that if you watch episode 2, you'll find it to be a bit jarring, as there is a lot different in terms of episode 2 than with the first episode. But overall, I walk out of episode 2 pretty happy, similar to when I walked out of episode 1. I think the future for Demon Slayer is quite bright, and I think it really has to do with just how interesting our main character's journey into becoming a powerful warrior is when you compare it to a lot of stories with a similar setting, because for him, his entire family was essentially killed, his only living family. She can't remove this basically piece of wood that she's kind of nibbling on so she doesn't bite someone accidentally, and he has to essentially become a powerful warrior so he can get into contact with demons and hopefully have her be turned back to human. But we're seeing that he's a little too kind for a journey such as this. He has troubles even killing demons who are trying to kill him. So I think the idea of someone who really has no right to be a demon slayer, but his main drive to becoming one and overcoming his own kind of character that is really a weakness in this job setting is pretty interesting, because his drive is quite noble, but is it actually possible for what he's trying to do? Obviously, time will tell as the story goes on. But this episode I thought was pretty good overall, because you really get a sense of that this journey is not going to be an easy one, especially for our main character, because his compassion is way too high, I think, for the job that he's going for. But obviously, as he trains and the more he fights against, obviously, demons and other humans, he'll be able to put up a fight and actually determine when he can and cannot kill. But also, with just the type of character he is, I wouldn't be surprised if we also get moments where he does let demons survive, if not join his party, because that's kind of the character he seemingly is. I will say, though, the first few minutes of this episode, it was a tad jarring, because it wasn't that it was a lot more lighthearted, it was the fact that it almost felt like it was in episode 3, because the death of his family wasn't even really brought up. The only thing that was his focus was his sister, which I guess does kind of make sense with his character. He's focusing on the living. This is who he has, and obviously, over the course of the story, he will reflect on the death of his family, maybe sitting around a campfire, things like that. Like, on one hand, it is a good thing that he is just focusing on the journey at hand. He's not just walking and crying about the death of his family. But on the other, you do question, like, why did he overcome something so tragic so easily? And I assume that will be answered as the story gets going. But on one hand, I can say, well, maybe he should have kind of reflected a bit more on the death of his family. But then on the other hand, it kind of makes sense for what we've seen with his character, really just focusing on his only living family and trying to turn her back into a human. But I thought the more lighthearted nature to this episode actually was better than what I'm typically used to when series try to balance more dark and gritty and bloody with more lighthearted kind of reactions, be it just what the characters are saying to just some of the goofy kind of faces. You have some pretty typical shonen design, like, I'm going to try to pay you for this broken wicker basket, and then, you know, just the typical stuff you would expect. But then when you have, like, this demon battle, it was actually pretty interesting, because I was expecting that if they were going to go a little more lighthearted with this guy who literally was just massacring people, it probably wouldn't work. But I actually found myself actually appreciating the balance of lightheartedness with the more dark and gloomy, because just the way the demons are functioning is so interesting, as even if you cut off their head, basically the head can regrow an entire body given enough time. We've seen that if you get a slash in the throat, that's a pretty easy fix for them, but they can regrow an entire body, so it seems like probably the only way to take care of a demon would be to burn them, let them go into sunlight, or just smashing their head to the point that it couldn't regenerate. And based on the fact that his sister seemingly hasn't ate since she became a demon, it's almost like they don't need to eat. It's more of a desire to eat for some reason. If not, maybe just they starve a lot slower than humans do, which is going to be pretty interesting, because if she does have to eat at some point, what are they going to do? Find a dead body and give that to her? Or does she not have to eat, and it's more of a desire that demons have, and maybe they are so different than humans? And I think just the world mechanics such as that are going to make this series really special. The deeper we go into it, it's going to feel more and more unique the longer we've followed this series, and I don't know if this is going to be a 1-core or a 2-core. I've heard rumors that apparently this could be a 2-core, which would be awesome if it was, but time will tell. But I think the more we watch and the more we learn about how the demon mechanics work and just overall the hunters and why some characters have like enhanced senses like smell or just hearing, I think it's really going to kind of set itself apart from the crowd with similar demon hunting kind of style of storytelling. But I think just the raw human emotions coming from our main character, who is honestly pretty terrified because he knows he has to fight and kill demons but that's not in his heart. And if he wants to save his sister, he's going to have to learn to be brave and overcome his own weakness, which in most situations wouldn't be a weakness. He's a kind person, but when you have to become a demon slayer to save your sister, that is going to be a weakness. But then again, in certain situations, it could be a weapon that's actually pretty useful, and only time will tell. Ufotable has always been great with composition, blending 2D and 3D scenery with their 3D camera work. I think they're probably the best in Japan when it comes to situations like these, because most of the time you can't even tell that something is 3D just because of how well they blend it. A lot of the time it's not even that something's 3D that's the issue, it's just that the way they blend the 2D and 3D scenery, it just comes across so gross and just so off-putting. But Ufotable rarely has that issue, especially when it comes to action-oriented sequences, and the way they use 3D camera work, especially when they were first fighting this demon, and even when he was doing this training sequence, the way the logs were coming in to try to hit him. Pretty much every 3D piece in this episode looked goddamn amazing. The only thing that kind of looked a little weird was when, I think it was like Bamboo kind of slapped him in the face. That was like the one moment where I was like, okay, that wasn't like the best we've seen. But the fact that there was actually so much 3D composition in this episode and it just looks so good, that's something that really Ufotable has crafted and really nailed this style, and it's why I think a series like this really should be adapted by them, because just the weight of the impact of the swords, or just the punches, or just a log hitting our main character in the face, I really think only Ufotable could deliver something like this. And I think just the over-polished and over-refined animation and character designs, because really the character designs aren't dipping yet, even on wider shots, which I'm really thankful for. It really feels as polished as one could be, and just the way the soundtrack really kind of makes that atmosphere all the more intense, even when we have the more silly scenes, like with a demon kind of like mocking our main character. It just still feels like there is a threat of death, like our main character could die. Nezuko could lose that gag and maybe even kill her brother, but I think there's just this interesting way of blending comedic, more simple scenes with also just such a terror, almost horror design sequence, which I really love. But it's pretty interesting how well the sister is actually handling this. Definitely seems like her personality and mind is in there, but it's driven by this like animal lust to feed on humans. But it's pretty interesting the fact that she can basically change her size, be it kind of like an adult body to attack, but also she can shrink, and in doing so you get some comedic scenes while also being able to kind of carry her in this basket throughout sunlight, so they're not forced to only travel during night, which would be pretty much impossible for this quest. So thankfully they have a way around that that actually makes sense for the world itself. But I like how the sequences between her and her brother, like, normally I don't think I'd like them. I think it would just feel a little too typical, and they are kind of typical. It's just something so wholesome, and it's kind of weird to say because she is a demon, but I think it's so wholesome because there is just this like family love that even though they're so different now, one is a demon and one is a human who's trying to be a demon hunter but really isn't fit for the job, it's nice that even when they are so different now and they've changed so much, they still will stand by each other and make sure they are protected. And you're seeing that, you know, there's something unique about the two, that this pair that shouldn't work in theory, a demon and a human, are still interacting as if they're family, and they could be different than what most of these hunters have seen, which is why he got recommended by this trainer, who is basically saying like, I'll train you because you passed my tests, and also it seems like there could be something special, especially between you and your sister. And I think that's what really excites me, is that there is enough hints and kind of like, you kind of assume like, okay, I can see where this could become super unique down the line. The deeper we go into this series, the more kind of interesting and more it will set itself apart from the crowd that it really will become. Right now, it's enough to be fun, stuff that people, yes, could point out and say is similar to other series that they've read or watched, but it's still, it just looks so goddamn amazing, it sounds amazing, there's real emotion with our main character, and there's also the more lighthearted scenes to kind of balance it out and kind of make it feel like a classic shonen, but not a bad classic shonen, just like a good one that didn't go wrong. So I'm pretty excited to see the future of this, because I really think that this series will become something special, and if we can get 2 cores of this, that would be amazing, but if we can only get 1 core, obviously that will still be pretty cool just to see where it goes. I do hope that the training will take a decent amount of time, that he doesn't just flip and become a badass. Obviously he has the skills that he could probably become a badass. He did survive the wilderness, and also he has an insane sense of smell that will obviously be very good if he can kind of hone in and really bring out that potential. But he is such a kind-hearted soul, so I hope that does take some time before he is just a total and utter badass, and hopefully the party will continue to grow and just really kind of let this cast flourish, and just as we explore this world and what the demons are and these hunters and just the personal stories at play, it's going to be exciting to see where ultimately this show wants to go. Overall, this was a very fun episode. I could see some people saying that it was a little jarring with the more simplistic and the more comedic stuff, and even that it just seems like he's kind of forgot about the death of his family. But I think in terms of like him reflecting on the death and things like that, I think that will come with time as we watch the series more and more. And just, it's going to be a personal preference if you like the more simplistic and lighthearted moments blended in with the more gruesome and bloody, which I'm personally fine with if they handle it well, and I think they really found an interesting way to blend it, so it's not too daunting or distracting, but obviously that will be personal preference. But for everyone who watched episode 2 of Demon Slayer, what did you think? Did you love it? Did you hate your favorite moment? Where do you think episode 3 is going to go next week? Let me know. And be sure to like the video if you did enjoy, and also hit that subscribe button if you're new around here. But until next time, everyone, please take care and have a good one.